Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Gossips 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The pressure inside Forrester Creations had been erecting for weeks, but no bone anticipated it to explode the way it did. What began as whispers about missing fiscal documents soon entwined into a full-bloated family extremity, dragging long-buried resentments into the open. At the center of it all were Brooke Logan, Katie Logan, Eric Forrester and Ridge Forrester, four people bound by history, fidelity, treason, and the fragile vestments of trust that had been stretched to their breaking point. Brooke had always believed that honesty was the foundation of every relationship, especially within the Forrester family. She had stood by Ridge through dishonors, business wars, and particular heartache. She had defended Eric's heritage as fiercely as if it were her own. But when irregularities in the company's fiscal records began to surface, Brooke felt a familiar knot strain in her casket. Commodity wasn't right, and her instincts told her that the verity would not be easy to face. The missing documents weren't just arbitrary lines. They were connected to a precious property deal involving the Forrester Manses conterminous estate, a parcel of land that Eric had still been negotiating to acquire. The sale was meant to secure the family's future and expand Forrester Creations' influence in the luxury fashion world. When the paperwork dissolved, so did the clarity girding the deal. Brooke originally assumed it was a simple executive error. After all, Forrester Creations had decades of libraries, innumerous contracts, and a staff that rotated constantly. But when she tete-a-tete searched the secured lines and set up nothing, her concern strengthened into dubitation. Someone had designedly removed the documents. Her hunt led her to Katie. Katie Logan had lately taken on further fiscal oversight liabilities within the company, working nearly with Eric on long-term investments. She had access to sensitive information and full concurrence to handle high-position contracts. To Brooke, the timing felt too accessible to ignore. What hurt the most wasn't just the possibility of wrongdoing. It was the idea that her own family might be hiding commodity. Brooke had spent her entire life navigating complicated family dynamics. The Logan sisters had fought, conformed, and fought again more times than anyone could count. But despite their differences, Brooke had always believed that blood meant commodity. Trust meant commodity. Now that belief was being tested. Rather than defying Katie intimately, Brooke decided to gather substantiation first. She reviewed sale logs, dispatched timestamps, and security access records. What she discovered only fueled her growing dubitation. Katie had penetrated the secure train system on the same night the documents faded. The coming morning, the deal was mysteriously put on hold. To Brooke, the pieces sounded to fit too impeccably. Her studies contended with uncomfortable possibilities. Was Katie trying to cover someone? Was she acting on her own? Or was there a deeper motive tied to her history with Bill? Her complicated passions about power? Or her desire to prove herself in the business world? Brooke abominated how fluently mistrustfulness crept into her heart, but she couldn't ignore what the substantiation suggested. The battle took place in Eric's office, the same room where decades of Forrester history had unfolded. Oils, fashion sketches, and family prints lined the walls, silent substantiations to yet another chapter of drama. Brooke didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her calm tone carried further weight than any crying ever could. She indicted Katie of taking the documents. The words landed like a lemon. Katie was stupefied, her face draining of color as she plotted to reuse what her family had just said. She claimed she hadn't stolen anything, explaining that she had penetrated the lines only to review fiscal protrusions. The blameworthiness cut deeply, not just because it questioned her integrity, but because it came from Brooke, the family who had always claimed to believe in her. Ridge arrived just as the pressure reached its peak. He'd spent times trying to keep the peace between the Logans and the Forresters, frequently chancing himself trapped in the middle. Seeing Brooke and Katie at odds again stirred up recollections of once conflicts that had nearly torn their family piecemeal. Ridge demanded answers, but none came fluently. Katie maintained her innocence, explaining that the documents had been moved as part of a security review, requested by Eric himself. She hadn't realized the lines were being labeled as missing, because they were temporarily transferred to a secure offline library. Brooke wasn't induced. Her feelings were clouded by times of complicated history, implied resentment, and a moping fear that the people closest to her were able of treason. The idea that Katie might have obtruded with Eric's plans felt particular, nearly like a crack restarted from the history. Eric, who had been silent throughout the battle, eventually spoke. But rather of addressing the blameworthiness directly, he made a decision that no bone saw coming. He blazoned that the property deal was cancelled. The room went quiet. Ridge goggled at his father in unbelief. That deal wasn't just a business occasion. It was a strategic move that could shape Forrester Creations' future for times. Canceling it meant walking down from growth, stability, and an important heritage. Brooke was shocked. Katie was confused. Ridge was speechless. Eric explained that the conflict girding the deal had revealed commodity more important than fiscal gain. The family was fractured, trust was broken, and continuing with the accession would only consolidate the divisions. To Eric, conserving continuity signified further than expanding the conglomerate. He believed the missing documents were a symptom of a larger problem: undetermined pressure, moping resentment, and a lack of communication. Whether the lines were stolen, lost, or dislocated, the damage had formerly been done. Ridge plotted to accept his father's logic. For times, Ridge had worked lifelessly to contemporize Forrester Creations, balancing tradition with invention. The property deal represented progress. It represented their future. To see it dismissed so fluently felt like a particular defeat. But Eric wasn't finished. He took his decision indeed further. He blazoned that Katie would step down from her fiscal oversight part, not as discipline, but as a way to restore peace. At the same time, Brooke would no longer be involved in internal checkups or examinations. Neither family was happy with the outgrowth. Katie felt unfairly sidelined. Brooke felt unheard. And Ridge felt helpless. The man who had erected his career on leadership, design, and vision suddenly set up himself unfit to impact his own family's direction. His father's authority, formerly comforting, now felt stifling. As the news spread through Forrester Creations, the atmosphere shifted. Workers rumored in hallways. Contrivers suspected about the company's future. The sense of stability that Eric had worked so hard to cover sounded more fragile than ever. Brooke began to question her conduct. Had she let dubitation override compassion? Had she allowed old injuries to shape her judgment? The idea that she might have hurt her family without solid evidence counted heavily on her heart. Katie, meanwhile, plotted with passions of treason. She had worked lifelessly to prove herself, to step out of the shadow of her history, and make a professional identity embedded in capability and integrity. Being indicted of theft, especially by Brooke, felt like a step backward in a trip she had fought hard to move forward from. Ridge set up himself caught between them, formerly again playing the part of middleman. He reminded Brooke of the significance of trust, of giving family the benefit of the mistrustfulness. He reminded Katie that misconstructions, still painful, didn't define her worth or her future. But words could only do so much. The real issue wasn't just the missing documents or the cancelled deal. It was the undetermined emotional history that dallied beneath every commerce. Old battles, implied grievances, and long-standing precariousness had resurfaced, hanging to pull everyone piecemeal. Eric watched it all unfold with quiet concern. His decision, though shocking, was embedded in experience. He'd seen this family survive numerous storms, affairs, power struggles, backstabbings, and heartache. He knew that business success meant nothing if the people behind it were falling piecemeal. Yet indeed he couldn't ignore the consequences of his choice. Forrester Creations faced query. Investors questioned the company's stability. Challengers tasted vulnerability. The cancellation of the property deal transferred a ripple through the fashion world, signaling that the formerly imperturbable Forrester heritage might be entering a new, changeable phase. Ridge began to feel the pressure more intensively than ever. As co-leader of the company, he was responsible for its future. But without his father's support for growth, his hands felt tied. Every decision came a balancing act between recognizing Eric's values and pursuing his own vision. Brooke, too, felt the weight of the situation. Her relationship with Ridge had always been complicated, shaped by love, passion, and numerous obstacles. Now, her conduct had placed them on contrary sides of a major family decision. She bothered that her blameworthiness hadn't only hurt Katie but also strained her bond with Ridge. Katie, on the other hand, concentrated on rebuilding her sense of tone. Stepping down from her part at Forrester Creations forced her to defy her fears about applicability, purpose, and identity. But it also gave her space to reflect on what truly signified to her: integrity, family, and emotional growth. Despite the pressure, small moments of understanding began to crop. Brooke ultimately conceded that she might have jumped to conclusions. She didn't completely repudiate her enterprises, but she softened her station, fading that dubitation. Without compassion could be just as damaging as treason itself. Katie accepted the reason cautiously, knowing that trust takes time to rebuild. Ridge continued to endorse for Consinity, reminding everyone that their participated history was stronger than any single conflict. Eric, watching his family sluggishly find their footing again, remained hopeful. His shocking decision had forced them to defy uncomfortable trueness, but it had also opened the door for mending. By prioritizing connections over profit, he'd reminded them of what the Forrester heritage truly stood for. The missing documents were ultimately recovered, revealing that they had been dislocated during a routine security upgrade. Not stolen, not hidden, just lost. But by the time the verity surfaced, the damage had formally reshaped the family's dynamic. What dallied wasn't wrathfulness but reflection. Brooke learned that trust must be defended, not tested. Katie learned that adaptability comes from tone belief, not external confirmation. Ridge learned that leadership occasionally means letting go of control. And Eric reaffirmed that family, with all its excrescencies, remains the heart of everything he erected. The reproach that began with a simple blameworthiness had evolved into a turning point for the Forresters and the Logans likewise. It exposed vulnerabilities, challenged commitment, and forced everyone to defy their own fears. Yet, in true bold and the beautiful fashion, it also paved the way for growth, understanding, and the possibility of a stronger future, one erected not just on success but on remission. The weeks following Eric's unanticipated decision brought a heavy, strange silence to Forrester Creations. The bustling energy that formerly defined the fashion house felt muted, replaced by careful ganders and restrained exchanges. The cancellation of the property deal had transferred shockwaves through every department, and the undetermined pressure between Brooke and Katie only added to the growing sense of query. Indeed, the creative brigades, generally absorbed in sketches and fabric tapes, sounded distracted by the emotional fallout unfolding at the top. Ridge set up himself carrying the weight of leadership more intensively than ever. With Eric stepping back from expansion plans, Ridge had to assure investors, mates, and workers that Forrester Creations remained strong and focused. But beneath his professional confidence, he felt deeply unsettled. His father's decision wasn't just about business. It was about family precedences, values, and the cost of undetermined conflict. Ridge admired Eric's wisdom, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that fear, not strategy, had guided the choice. Brooke, meanwhile, plotted with guilt. Criminating Katie had felt justified in the moment, driven by deficient information and long-standing emotional scars. But now, with the verity about the documents sluggishly arising, Brooke began to question her own judgment. She had always flattered herself on being intuitive, on seeing when commodity was wrong. This time her instincts had led her into a painful misreading that fractured trust within her own family. Katie's life changed dramatically after stepping down from her part at the company. The unforeseen shift forced her to defy precariousness she allowed. She had formerly overcome. Without the structure of diurnal liabilities and professional confirmation, she had further time to reflect on her history, her choices, and her place within the Forrester world. She had worked lifelessly to make credibility after times of emotional fermentation, and now she felt as however all that trouble had been overshadowed by one blameworthiness. Despite the distance between the sisters, both Brooke and Katie felt the absence of their former closeness. Their relationship had always been complicated, shaped by contest, fidelity, and participated history. Yet there was comfort in knowing that no matter what happened, they were still family. That sense of connection, though strained, no way fully faded. At Forrester Creations, Eric continued to observe everything still. He'd lived long enough to understand that family conflict frequently ran deeper than face position controversies. The missing documents had simply exposed emotional fractures that had been forming for times. His decision to cancel the deal wasn't about retreating from progress. It was about precluding farther emotional damage that could permanently fracture the family. Still, Eric also understood the cost of his choice. Business openings, formerly lost, infrequently returned in the same form. Challengers were formerly moving into the space Forrester had vacated, and investors were watching nearly. Eric hoped his family would heal snappily, but he knew time wasn't always forgiving. Ridge began spending further time assaying the company's long-term direction. Without the expansion plan, Forrester Creations had to direct on strengthening its core identity. Ridge encouraged invention within Being Collections, pushing contrivers to elevate their work and support the brand's prestige. He wanted the company to thrive not through size, but through excellence. The pressure boosted when rumors began circulating in the fashion assiduity. Tales of internal disharmony, canceled deals, and family controversies painted Forrester Creations as unstable. Ridge worked lifelessly to fight the narrative, projecting confidence and concinnity. But intimately, he bothered about how long they could maintain that image without genuine resolution at home. Brooke's internal struggle grew heavier with each passing day. She realized that her blameworthiness hadn't only hurt Katie, but had also forced Eric into an insolvable position. Her conduct had told a decision that affected hundreds of workers and the company's future. The weight of that responsibility was delicate to ignore. She began to reflect on her own patterns, how snappily she replied when she felt hovered, how once backstabbing shaped her present comprehensions. Brooke had survived numerous emotional storms, but survival occasionally came at the cost of trust. This time, she wasn't sure if her instincts had defended her or betrayed her. Katie, on the other hand, sought clarity down from the commercial world. She concentrated on particular growth, reconnecting with herself outside the Forrester terrain. The experience was both freeing and painful. She missed the sense of purpose her part had given her, but she also appreciated the space to rediscover who she was without constant pressure. Despite everything, Katie no way lost her belief in integrity. She knew she hadn't stolen anything, and she trusted that the verity would ultimately be honored. What hurt most wasn't the blameworthiness itself, it was the feeling that her family hadn't trusted her enough to ask questions before making hypotheticals. As time passed, the verity about the missing documents came clearer. A routine security system upgrade had temporarily transferred sensitive lines to an offline library. The process had been inadequately communicated, creating the vision of missing paperwork. No theft, no sabotage, no retired docket, just a failure in communication. When this information eventually surfaced, it brought a blend of relief and remorse. Relief because Katie's innocence was verified. Remorse because the damage had formerly been done. Brooke felt a deep sense of guilt. She had let dubitation override understanding, and the consequences had been far-reaching. Her relationship with Katie had suffered. Eric had canceled a major business deal, and Ridge had been left floundering to hold everything together. Katie accepted the explanation with grace, but mending took time. Trust, formerly shaken, doesn't return overnight. Still, she appreciated that the verity had come out, and that her integrity was no longer in question. Eric, reflecting on the outgrowth, stood by his decision. Indeed, though the documents hadn't been stolen, the emotional fallout had revealed deeper issues that demanded attention. The family had been operating under implied pressures for too long. This situation forced them to defy those feelings rather of ignoring them. Ridge, though frustrated by the misplaced occasion, began to understand his father's perspective. The property deal had represented progress, but concinnity represented stability. Without a strong foundation at home, no expansion could truly succeed. Gradationally, the atmosphere at Forrester Creations began to ameliorate. With clarity restored, workers recaptured confidence in leadership. Contrivers directed on creativity, and the company's energy sluggishly returned. Yet, the emotional scars within the family remained. Brooke and Katie started taking small way toward conciliation. They didn't rush the process. Rather, they allowed space for honest reflection, admitting the pain without continuing old injuries. Their bond, though altered, remained confirmed in participated history and love. Ridge set up renewed determination in guiding the company forward. He balanced respect for Eric's values with his own vision for invention. Every decision he made now carried deeper meaning, shaped by the assignments learned from the extremity. Eric, watching his family navigate this new chapter, felt both proud and reflective. His life's work had always been about further than fashion. It had been about erecting commodity lasting. The recent fermentation reminded him that patrimonies are fragile, shaped not just by success, but by the connections that sustain them. The reproach that began with a simple blameworthiness eventually came a catalyst for growth. It forced everyone to defy their vulnerabilities, reassess their precedences, and face the significance of communication. For Brooke, it was an assignment in modesty. For Katie, an assignment in adaptability. For Ridge, an assignment in leadership. For Eric, a memorial that family always comes first. Though the future remained uncertain, the Forresters and Logans surfaced stronger, wiser, and more apprehensive of the delicate balance between ambition and emotional connection. And in true Bold and the Beautiful fashion, the drama didn't end, it evolved, setting the stage for new challenges, deeper connections, and the continuing saga of love, fidelity, and heritage.